Welcome everyone to a new episode of our podcast, Conscious Health Podcast. In today's episode, we have an honored guest, Austin called Jacob, and we are going to have a very intriguing, alchemizing conversation about many things. We will cover a lot of topics, and what we are mainly going to talk about is how you can transform your story into your gift by accessing the best qualities that you can have. So, Austin is a spiritual visionary, metaphysical leader, and consciousness awareness coach who embodies his mission of awakening, remembering, and transforming. He guides indigo aligned individuals to activate their soul, remembrance, and reclaim their divine potential through transformative awareness experiences that blend energy healing, metaphysical coaching, and spiritual philosophy. Austin's work isn't about fixing, but about activating the inherent wisdom within. He believes indigo souls are encoded with unique frequencies meant to catalyze the human evolution, and that our challenges are sacred contracts for growth. Through his teachings, rooted in alchemy, hermeticism, and self inquiry, Austin offers a path to evolve, transmuting burdens into blessings and leading not from a distance, but from a place of profound presence. His vision is to empower those encoded with ancient resonance to flourish, fostering a world that values depth, awareness, and energetic mastery. So thank you, Austin, for being here. Thank you, Natasha, of course, for co-host with me.
Absolutely. It's so good to be here. Wow, what an impressive journey you've been on already, and you're so young. That really makes me super, super excited. And I think it's a testament of the younger generations that are coming to make the changes. You talk about indigo souls. I'm going to ask you to, for our listeners, to define what an indigo soul is, just so that they know, because I also think that there's a lot of misunderstandings at the moment. But yeah, super excited to hear more about your journey. So tell us more about your journey, and also if you could give us your definition of what an indigo soul is, that would be amazing.
Yes, absolutely. First, thank you, David, for that beautiful introduction. So an indigo soul, the way I understand it, is a person who has incarnated, in this field, in this realm, with a spiritual mission, and generally to transform consciousness. And some things to know about indigo souls are their innate, let's frame it, abilities, or their deep understanding, whether they might not have the awareness around what that understanding is. I say innate because at a very young age, these things are building and growing, and they're learning more of the internal world than that external. It often also has to do with the third eye. So a lot of intuitive abilities going on, a lot of energy sensitivities. And this often can be misplaced or misunderstood as, overstimulation or seeing things, psychosis. And this is, in at least the old paradigm of mental health, how some of those things can get misportrayed and maybe not nurtured in a way that actually allows the individual, this child, to start understanding those gifts and the way they're perceiving the world. But really, like I said, they're incarnated here because they have a bigger mission, and it's generally to unlock hidden knowledge, transform unity consciousness, and pave the way for new ways of understanding, or not even new ways, really it's a remembrance. So I should say old ways of understanding the world.
Beautiful. That's a great description. It's so on topic. I think a lot of these neurodiversities that are coming up, they're seen as disabilities, but I usually see them as kind of like spidey sensors, because they are the children that have come to actually change the world. And the world doesn't work anymore in the way it used to. And these beautiful souls have come to pave the way. And sometimes it can be, I find them to be quite, it can be quite difficult because we're going against the norm. And I work within the Akashic Records, and it's not about being the black sheep. It's the black sheep become the shepherds, is making those changes that really come in, that need to come in. And I think that as the world changes, because I think within medicine, within education, within all these structures, all systems need to be broke down and rebuilt again. And I think these beautiful people have come in to help with that transformation, which is quite beautiful. Tell us about your journey. How did you find your way to doing what you do?
Well, oh my journey. Well, I like that you threw out some of the terms that, you know, I kind of see it as a progression, if you will, from, I went from, just to frame this, mental health, you're sick, you're broken, you got issues, you got problems, you're not like everyone else type thing, to then neurodivergent, which then it was more, oh, you're special, you nothing's wrong with you, you just think differently, to then indigo. And this was kind of my progression through these labels, these terms that, as I developed myself, I honestly was then able to understand more and more about myself. So I love that you threw out the neurodivergence, and kind of put out the framework that it is a very real thing, because it is. You know, it's, as I stand here, or sit here rather, before you today, you know, some of the things that I have struggled through, they are not gone, but they do not show up in the same way, because I've had the opportunity to work through and understand exactly what is it going on in my own frame of understanding. And the reason why I throw that out there is because it is a big part of my mission now up until this point, is to show people, whether that's through proof or just providing knowledge, references of, you know, the importance of this work, the importance of learning to accept your uniqueness, and, you know, maybe the representation of what can unfold from that. Now, I will say, I did kind of go down the spiritual path, which to me just means inner work, you know, because I kind of view everything as spiritual, but I started to really going in more so that if you could imagine, than what I was already innately going within before. But this time when I was going in, I was then integrating the understandings that I was picking up from the outside. And it wasn't until I went off on my own journey of information, research, you know, reaching out to different communities, that a lot unfolded. So I've done a lot of talks on neurodivergence and mental health, and it can be very activating for a lot of people. So I like to also be mindful of how, when I progress through this, I'm also progressing with how I'm kind of delivering the information, because I do want as many people to realize, one, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. That's for start. But when we get into, say, if I'm working with a client and we're going into more deeper things, it can bring up a lot that someone might not realize. Oh, I'm not really comfortable or ready to face these things. So sometimes the best you can do is be the best version of yourself, and that's almost like planting the seeds, just by, you know, your presence alone. So, so linearly, let's see, my first, I guess, time that I could recognize a shift, I was 23 years old. And this was when I got, I was diagnosed for a second time as an adult. I was 23 years old, and this was a big shift. I wasn't necessarily doing a lot of inner work at this time, but one thing that came out of this diagnosis, this is when I got the autism spectrum disorder and the psychosis and a couple of other things. You know, some people might think, oh no, woe is me, I got all these things. But for me, it was actually very liberating. You know, I felt this sense of relief, because now it had moved on from, you know, very early childhood up until that point of me struggling with, obsessive compulsive, attention deficit, anxiety and depression, and all the many symptoms that came through for me in that way. But now I had almost this closure that I didn't know I really needed through this diagnosis, to then go out in the world. And this is why it was liberating. I then went out into the world from that point on, not needing to validate what was actually going on. It was almost like I was searching for validation with that diagnosis, that, oh, you see, I'm I'm not crazy. Like, the things that are going on, they really are going on. The thing about it, though, is the diagnosis didn't actually tell me anything that I knew about myself, but it did give me that, how should I say, it was the closure. It was the support that said, you can move on and start defining your life as you need to define it. And so at 23, this was when the first seed was planted of my spiritual journey, so to speak, if I were to frame it as a spiritual journey. I went and met a friend for the first time. He was a deep friend. Shout out to Tom Lupari. And he told me some things that I had never heard before. And this is the beautiful thing about the universe. That message that he shared, I won't share here, but the message that he shared with me, I would not have been able to receive it had I not first had the ability to accept my uniqueness, my neurodivergence, however you want to frame that. And then, now 7.5 years later, I really enjoy this new term, or not even new, but the term of indigo, because it encapsulates not only this neurodivergence, but the uniqueness of a soul and a more universal mission that is all about more unity and, uplifting people versus comparison and separating and defining. This is complete opposite. Indigo souls are very well known for, if you ever heard of an old soul, that's an indigo soul. That's, they have this deep inner knowing, and until they start learning what is trying to be expressed, it'll just stay within. But they do go against the mold, so to speak. They're there to transform energy, to rebel, or there's a natural resistance to like conformity, and I can attest to that. I always was so curious about the middle way, or the other side. One of the things that was more often than anything else in my entire life that people know me for is perspective. And it really didn't click until I was probably 28, and I sent out this little test to everyone, and I wanted to know, what about me do you like about me? It was like part of this marketing thing I got into, and they had me send this out. And I'm telling you, the reason why I went down the route of that I did was because what came back, what people were saying about me was, Austin, you have a unique way of opening up my own perspective just by sharing yours. Or, the way you perceive things is so unique. So I hope that I gave a little taste of a little bit of my journey there.
Yeah. I am very, very curious about these, let's say, flashes of wisdom that you receive, or these unique ways of looking for this perspective that I'm assuming that is wider than other people, and that I can also attest for that, because we have had conversations in the fireside chat, and we have talked about other people's views. And when you express something, you see the things in a broader view, and that allows the other people, as they are telling you or as they have told you, that sharing first your perspective about something allows the other people to see the wood and not just the tree. So how do you receive that information in your mind, or what happens that can be confused? And probably that's why they do that diagnosis with a psychotic episode, let's say. No.
Okay, so a lot there. Thank you for that. A funny to me little story is, my best friend, well, he doesn't think I'm his best friend, but I'm his best friend. He often will tell me, Austin, you're constantly seeing the forest for the trees, is how he says it. And that was spot on. Because it's not so, here's a big misconception that I get often, not maybe reflected because the person might not know how to articulate this, but often what I'll get people reflecting back to me is they're just looking for the tree answer. And sometimes for somebody with a depth or who's not necessarily, whether they're not able or they haven't fine-tuned their own ability to kind of jump in that person's shoes, or however you want to frame it, they're looking at the forest. This, like you said, can often end up in a misdiagnosis, or maybe a lack of nurturing and understanding there, because it's almost like the person has stepped back so far and sees the entire thing. And so when they're talking about the entire forest, and the other person, maybe the person giving the diagnosis, is only focusing on one step at a time, like this leaf on this tree over here, and you're talking about how the ecosystem is affecting the world type view, there's a disconnect there. And the other term I heard you say was psychosis.
Yeah.
So there was a time when I experienced psychosis a lot. And when I was following a metaphysical leader that I no longer follow, but I stick around in the background, one thing that she sent out to me was a metaphysical kind of definition of what was going on with psychosis. And this really helped. So I felt called to share right now. So besides what most people understand as psychosis, as maybe a neurosis, or, you know, seeing things, hearing things, not in the right mind, yada, yada. From a metaphysical standpoint, it's more simple to say there's an overactivation of the higher, if we're doing 7, not 13 chakras, the top 3 chakras are so highly activated. And then the bottom 3, especially the grounded one, root chakra, is absent. It's not. And that's what actually causes the psychosis. So I thought I'd throw that out there. So a great way, if you are experiencing an episode, which is how I looked at them, I'm hitting it, because you very much know you're in it, but you're still like forest thinking. So it's sometimes it's hard to dial down the language to meet the world around you where they're at. And this isn't about comparison, you know, oh, someone who sees from the forest is better. No. Don't get caught in that in that whirlwind. It's more it's just acknowledgement of, you know, how you see things. You know, it's not a comparison thing. It's really not. I don't know how to frame that around that. And then the other thing I heard you say reminded me, I think you said alchemizing. It reminded me a lot of language and how I even got into exploring this whole forest seeing versus trees. I love this analogy. Absolution of language. Top 3 struggles of my entire life, and they still come up today, is language. And I often would find, especially growing up, that I got along a lot better with generations before me, so not my peer group. And often it was because of language barriers. Not that I didn't enjoy or prefer, you know, kids my age, but there would be times where I didn't feel relatable, or maybe couldn't relate some of the things that I was perceiving unless I went and spoke with somebody who could just start sharing their story. Because I could, even though I didn't understand why I got what they were saying, their depth and their, say, more of a forest view of the world because of their years and age, they were able to just talk, and I would pick up, I would be downloading so much information. But why I named language one of the top 3 things was because there is an absolution to it. It's like anytime you add language to something, there's a potential to change its meaning or definition, or add a definition and meaning to things. Whereas somebody who is very indigo, there's like a gnosis, a deep knowing. And then language just becomes the tool in which we use to help break down the forest into trees.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much there. Wow, what a journey you've been on. And I can see, based on your journey, where it's brought you to now and how you're helping people, because a lot of the work that I do is that I think we spend most of our childhood, experiencing the traumas, experiencing the limitations to then heal them and then help others is usually the cycle that I've seen. And everything that we've been through creates that vibrational frequency that will attract others that have been through the same experiences in one way or another, which I found absolutely beautiful. But so much to unpack there in the sense of my daughter got diagnosed with dyslexia, and she had the same thing in that sense that you had. And I was trying to tell her, it's like when I first found out, I was like, this is actually a special gift, and so many amazing people. And I started lifting off like Einstein, like all these people, Richard Branson, so many people. And she's like, Mom, I know. She's like, I know I'm different. And she goes, I don't need anything else. It's a relief. I'm not crazy. I'm not, anything else. I just have this. And I was like, wow. I mean, she teaches me every day. I mean, she's only 14, but that aspect of like, I'm okay. And what a relief. Like, it was absolutely oh my God, this is what it is, kind of a thing. And that was absolutely amazing. And I was like, she didn't need my encouragement. She was just like, it's done. And we're going further into it, and there is more stuff that's in behind there. And I'm like, oh my goodness, you really are like it. And I'm seeing it from a place of admiration rather than a place of worry, because we're so taught that this is what it is, right? So it's just like, okay. And it's just beautiful, because now I spend a lot of my time going, how does your brain work? Kind of a thing. Like, there's this curiosity, and which is amazing part of that, because I'm dyslexic as well. So it's amazing how we find different ways of working around things. So it's like, oh, how have you found a different way? And she's very, very creative. So she communicates that you're talking about language, which she communicates through. She's very arty. So she does a lot of drawings and a lot of it's and in her clothes and everything. So she's very creative in that way and super smart. But it was just that relief. And I witnessed that within my daughter. So I completely understand that and sympathize with that. And I encourage other parents. And now that that's happened, and I've gone into the spiritual side of like, what is this? Why is this happening? I'm actually working with a friend of mine who she's actually started going into helping people that are neurodivergent in many ways to try and explain that. And it's like, it's such a gift. Like let's get comfortable. And how do you work with that? And it's like, I used to say that, like, when they were kids, they would be like, Mom, I really can't handle being around this child. Whenever she's angry, I just see red. And I'm like, you know what? That is like, you're like an X-Man. Like, I was like, this is like this, you're seeing this person's auric field. Not a lot of people see it, but don't lose it. This is what's going on. I mean, they were like 6 or 7. And then the other one would be like, yeah. And then when she's like really like being spiteful, it turns to this kind of like, like dark kind of like brown kind of blackish color. And I was like, that's okay. This is what is happening, right? But then it got to a stage where I think she was like 7, she's like, I'm too young for this. I don't want this. She's like, it can pick me up again later when I can deal with this stuff. And I'm like, nobody's switching off any spidey senses in this household, kind of a thing. But she's kind of like given it a bit of a way. But it's interesting because And recall, I believe everybody's spiritual, absolutely. Some have got their abilities or accept their abilities more than others and develop their abilities more than others. And I've started to find that all my friends that are practitioners, there is something within us that kind of like ties us all together, because it's important, because this allows us to straddle both worlds, because we need to.
Yes,
I think.
absolutely. That was
Yeah.
so touching to hear. That's so beautiful that um this can be nurtured, and there we're coming into a
Mm-hmm.
time where, and there are already cultures, let me throw that out there.
Yeah.
There are already cultures out there, that when this is recognized, first off, it's not called mental health there, but then it's
No.
also nurtured, because another thing to know about, whether you frame it spiritual abilities,
Yeah.
psychic abilities, um, we all have them. We are all
Mm-hmm.
born with them, but no one person is alike either. So it's not so the reason why I threw it out there is, because you don't want to fall into like the comparison trap. It's
No.
really, and another thing you threw out was the trauma. Here's a good way to frame this. Just like everyone kind of has the same abilities as a human, no one is above experiencing trauma. All trauma is,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
response that the body was not prepared for, which is why it could be
Yeah.
anything. Anything could be traumatic. You could be laughed at and
Yeah.
embarrassed in school, and that be I will attest, can be
Absolutely.
a traumatic experience. What I find kind of uh, befalls a lot of indigo people or neurodivergent people or people who are maybe aren't nurtured like how you described, that trauma then can build, and
Yeah.
it serves its purpose, sure, and hopefully a lot of them end up, being healers, because they can take that experience and reframe it into empowering others. But that just really touched me, that we're seeing in real time how, you know people are coming together with curiosity. That was another word you threw out there.
Mm-hmm.
Being curious of how is that mind, functioning,
Mm-hmm.
and nurturing that, empowering them. Beautiful. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
no, absolutely. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I agree with you in, and I think in schools they used to, she used to get home and she'd be like, define everything, and I'm like, Michaela, you don't need to define it. You can define that later. Just experience the now, kind of a thing. You don't have to, and it is very much a human thing. Like you say, we need to define everything, I think, because it keeps us safe, because we can put a label on it. And it's like, perhaps we just experience that, right? Just, you don't have to make a decision now. Like, just allow, just be, which is beautiful. Sorry, I'm hijacking you here. David, do you have any
No, no,
questions while
no.
we're in here?
You are just you are just sparking more ideas inside of me, so don't worry. I'm remembering right now a talk that I saw from an Ecuadorian runner, ultra marathon runner, and he shared his experience about how his mother reframed a diagnosis that they made for him since he was a child. When they went to the doctor, he suffered episodes of fainting, and it was one day that he experienced more than 3 episodes in just one day of fainting. And they took him to the doctor, and the doctor said that he had epilepsy, and he explained the term, and he gave all the things, and he made the limitations that he had to do as all the traditional doctors. But the mother was silent, was just listening. And when they went out from the doctor, uh, she spoke with him, and she told him, you know what, anything that the doctor said is true. So what I will ask you to do is to quit your destiny. Quit your destiny, because your destiny is not made by anyone else but you. And what you have in your mind is something that is a gift, because your neurons are so fast to think that sometimes it's like when you are going on a bike and you are going too fast, And sometimes what happens? And she asked to the child, what happens? And he said, you fall. And what happens when you fall? You get up and you continue. So that's what can happen in your life. You will fall and you will have to get up and continue. But that just means that your brain is so fast, faster than anyone else's brain. And by reframing the diagnosis of the physician into something that is a gift, and the child believing that he was faster to think, he developed this quality that he challenged himself to do everything he wants. He is one of the best ultramarathon runners, and he did two of the most difficult runnings in the Antarctica and in the desert of the Sahara. 240 kilometers. I couldn't even imagine that a human can run that distance. So this child with epilepsy, and he also had difficulties to speak because his brain was fast, and he learned to speak, and now he's a coach and someone that gives talks around the world, even compared to Tony Robbins. So this is the importance of what you are saying, Natasha, with your daughter, and the importance that you also discovered yourself, Austin, that a diagnosis is just a word. It's just a word made up by the medical community to label and to also medicate many people without investigating, without being curious, without trying to help them understand what is happening beyond uh, a label and a definition, because many times that label comes from the definition of a book that they made up themselves. So that's the contradiction that we have in the medical world. And my question now is, how did you discover, because you mentioned something that when you received that diagnosis about the psychosis and the autism and all of those words, you felt also a liberation. How did you process that when you listen to that words, in addition of probably having someone that reframed that from you or for you, and or if there wasn't anyone, how did you do it to step out from that definition and make your own?
Let's take me back. Yes, it was liberating, in a very odd kind of way, because like I said, it didn't change anything. You know, like understanding what somebody wrote as the DSM-5, and that gets updated all the time. There was a part of me though that it was an inner closure, you know, because I still wasn't able to actually take that knowledge and then share it with other people, and somehow they understood me. But I understood myself more, in a way of accepting. Like it was my sign, the universe's sign to say, what's going on internally, and what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, what you're perceiving, all of this information, you know, the overstimulation, the hyper focus, and then the stagnation, the stimming, all these things. We could talk about all day about symptoms, but it got down to an origin of, this is me, this is my life. I'm not delusional, I guess is the best way I can put it. And what I was able to do from that point onward, you know, it took many years to, about 6 years before I started to then dive into it specifically and with intention. But I was able to go from that point on and maybe not get worse. You know, in other words, I didn't feed into the label. I almost stepped away from the label. I carried it, so to speak, along with me, but I was able to start reframing what was going on, because I finally had somebody to say, yeah, you're right. There is more going on than we can explain, but here's something to help you along the way, type thing. And this isn't to say either for our audience that there are not cases where medical intervention is not necessary. That's not the case. But just make sure that the decisions you're making are to empower and not define or control. Because maybe I'm biased, but getting that definition that the doctor had given to me, I then went and made my own. And that was more empowering than actually just getting it. It was more of a liberating thing just because there was like that nurturing recognition. And then I was able to then accept what was going on and start working with it. Transgressing or transcending those things, though, it took a lot of effort. I had to change how I was treating myself, how I was, using medications. I think one of the things I did to actually get off of prescription meds, like stimulant medications, antipsychotics, SSRIs, all those kinds of things. I had to really understand my body, myself, what was working for me. And that's another big thing that I think people might get really eager to, I don't want to deal with none of this. I just want to be normal, quote unquote. And they'll almost drop all of it. That's very dangerous, especially like with depression, because that was a hard thing for me. So this is where the self-inquiry comes in, and the pacing, really knowing yourself, but also having, I wasn't afforded a support group, but don't shy away from sharing your uniqueness and say, hey, I would like to do this. Would you be there? Maybe it's an accountability partner or just somebody else who's aware of what you're going through, so that you're not so alone in the process. Because I don't know, I wasn't afforded that. It served me still, but if I could go back, I would have much rather had somebody to walk with me on the journey than having to figure it out all on my own. Maybe it would have been a quicker. I mean, because it took a good year before I was able to really start addressing some of the deeper things that were going on, And again, this didn't change who I was. It enhanced who I was. I understood myself at a deeper level. And I understood other people at a deeper level. I started to see more of the trees instead of being stuck in that forest view, struggling to communicate with peers and coworkers and the community as a whole. It was full circle for me. I kind of lost out on the question. What did you ask, David?
No, I think you already explained it. You already touched on that it's that power of knowing yourself in a deeper level, in how your body also reacts to, in your case, it was phasing out of the medication and slowly going to drop it, and not just being impulsive in those reactions, but also acknowledging that you had certain kind of symptoms, let's say, but you saw the symptoms as an enhancement and not as a limitation. So that's an important message that I think that many people have to understand when we go to a physician or to this kind of traditional medical experiences. What we want is to be understood in terms of enhancing our bodies, enhancing our skills, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't receive a medication. Of course, that if you need it, you just have to take it for certain period of time. And then also, I think that what has to change is that we have to encourage more the physicians to go deeper and not just stay in the surface of giving a pill and making the symptoms disappear, because that just create addiction to the medication. And what you did and what many people can do is to accept that they need at certain point in their lives a particular kind of medication to balance the chemical things that they have in discordance or in not in resonance or in balance. And once they achieve that, they should start knowing and asking more about their bodies and about what is happening and how are you coping with the lower dose, and then a lower dose and a lower dose until you arrive and you phase out from the medication.
Yeah,
No?
absolutely. Yeah, I went the holistic route. So I first switched over to like supplements, and then I would pick up breath work, meditation, then looking into um, kind of what's that word when you like evaluating how am I using my time. So I started diving into what are my habits? Am I outside? Am I getting sun? Am I in nature?
Circadian.
And I love that you touched on this reframe of I coined it actually one of my groups is burdens into blessings because um, before I was opened up to oh there's spiritual significance to all of this, that's what I was doing in real time, just to kind of get through. I chose to, because at 23, I kind of started to more or less accept, okay, this is just how it is, this is my life. I started to, because I was liberated to reframe them. And it was almost an exciting game to realize how I could use these things to my advantage. Because I there's that rebellion again, wanting to obviously be good because I knew I was highly intellectual, sure. But what was my intellect worth when I couldn't actually articulate it out to the world what was going on? So I got into that trap of, I would water down how I spoke. I lost a lot of depth. I don't speak in a lot of metaphors and philosophically as I used to. Probably getting back into that as I read a lot more. But the takeaway is I did reframe these burdens into blessings. Like, here's a simple example: ADHD. Oh my goodness, that was predominantly my life. And one of the reframes that I enjoyed, believe it or not, was hyperfocus. Because when I started to be able to recognize that I was in that mode, oh, I could get some stuff done. And so it was almost like my hidden superpower, if you will. But just that simple reframe of being appreciative of my neurodivergence in that little way empowered me. It sounds so small, but it's polarity also too. If I realized, okay, I cannot read this book, I'm not going to be able to drive, or you know what, I'm just not going to sleep, however it was in its polarity, I would start taking advantage of that. And that kind of introspection, that playing around with this reframing, as I innately would do with absolution of words all the time, I just started doing with the new things that were coming through. How can I play around with this quote unquote symptom and really use it to my advantage?
Beautiful. I commend you on your courage for doing the mental and emotional work behind those physical symptoms, because that takes courage to really, really look within. And it's a lot of people will avoid that because that's painful, that reflection. So I commend you. And I do a lot of my work is looking at, okay, no, let's what is the mental emotional aspect behind that? And I love the reframing because a lot of my work now is based on rewriting your story. So it's looking at that in that sense of, okay, it's surfaced because you're ready to work for it. It's given you something up until now. What has it given you? Right? How is this working for me? And I love that you're doing that in real time, because it's amazing once we step back with that curiosity and going, how's this working for me? Right? How is this? what is the situation? Why is it? And sometimes it's really situations that we feel this really sucks. This is like painful. Like, why is this happening? And then we're like, nope, I'm not going to let it get me down. Like, how is this working for me? What opportunities are showing up in that sense? So, which direction is this throwing me into? I tend to have a look at that, and I love that you reframe that. I love that you use that as in this is actually an ability. How am I going to use that in this moment? So I love that you do that, because that takes an incredible amount of courage to do that. And I also have a belief, whether it's limited, but this is the belief right now, is that everything that has the physical symptom is usually the last protocol. It has started mentally and emotionally. The physical symptoms are important, which is why yes, I absolutely agree. Medication works when it works. Pharmaceuticals, I usually do also try and go the natural route, but sometimes you can't avoid it. And I believe both medicines work together having worked with people that are going through chemo and all sorts of stuff and doing kind of like healing work. It's like, okay, let's allow whatever medication is there, allow your body to absorb it. Let's flush out what doesn't work for you, but it's all part of those experiences that actually allow you to lead. That's your light that shines, that calls, we say, shine your weirdo light, because then all the other weirdos like you will find you.
Yeah.
Because, and I think that creates the tone of your light that actually lights up other people. Which is great. So thank you for leading by example, because this is doing this a lot later on in life. You start having more of those layers to uncover. So I think your soul has chosen to, I don't think you do anything slowly. So everything's just like, I want it now. It's like, let's go through all of this, because there's no time to lose in one way. There's a lot to be done in this short span of this lifetime, if we look at it from a metaphysical perspective. So I commend you in having the courage to look at yourself from a different perspective and rewrite your story in a way that empowers you.
Yeah, I can only imagine how my life would have been different, say, if there was an environment that was spiritually knowledgeable enough to nurture me. Because, I mean, in, say, 10 months, when I, quote unquote, stepped into my power, I walked away from a lot of systems I was comfortable in. In 10 months, I felt like I grew 10 years. And I love that you brought up about it showing up in the physical, because I'm also in a similar belief that if there was some kind of chain, spiritual, and then it ends up in physical. And I also love that you threw out there of that it's showing up for a reason, to be noticed, to be integrated, to transcend, because it's serving you. And I preach that constantly, that what I have experienced, was it fun? No. Was it horrible? A lot of it, yes. But it served me, and being able, which took time to learn, and practice reframing those experiences, I learned, why and how it has served me. And I continue to learn. It's an ongoing journey. It never ends. One of the most challenging things for me was my panic attacks. And that was one of the harder medications to get away from. So anxiety, basically. And this, I couldn't just simply, make a decision and start working through. It was very sympathetic nervous system. It was very visceral of an experience. This was when I had to start incorporating the breath work and the meditation, and honestly opening up some areas of myself that I at the time would have preferred to never go into. But had I have been exposed to more of the spiritual knowledge in the community earlier, I do see, and the reason why I throw this out there is to kind of put emphasis on the importance of nurturing the uniqueness of every person, neurodivergent, special, no, every single person.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
I am curious now of talking about this mixture and this alchemy, that word came up in your description and in your profile and all of those things. And I, of course, it lures me because I am a biochemical engineer. I love that alchemy, and I love that alchemy. So in terms of these experiences mixed with the medication, mixed with the labeling, if you mix them all, what do you come up with, or how do you explain that to anyone that comes with the same, well, not the same, but a similar story?
How do I mix it? Or can you ask that another way?
How how do you unpack all of that blend of things that happen, because it's the labeling, the medication, the experience, the symptoms that people in this neurodivergent community will experience also in a similar way. So how do you help someone that comes in that line but that needs some guidance from you?
Well, that can probably be boxed into alchemy itself. Alchemy is a lot of people see alchemy as turning this lead into gold, as if it's a very physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you put it in philosophical terms, it's not so much physical. It's more of an internal thing. Your internal lead, Saturn, turning into more Jupiter, the sun. That's the gold, and so that's the start. I often in my classes or whatever I'm doing, the first step is awareness, and that can show up in a lot of different ways. But I believe that the first step is to become aware of where you're at. What are the thoughts going through your mind? You have to really assess yourself, sit with yourself, come to that point of accepting, how am I perceiving the world in this moment? And then from there is where I would kind of start an alchemical process with the person. The challenge, though, I find is because we are all so very diverse, but specifically, the neurodivergent community, there are a lot of activations, there are a lot of triggers. So it can get sensitive for a lot of these things. So one of the things I'm finding is a challenge for even me is, I guess, remembering, some of the things that I've been through and trying to be patient with it, because, now I'm like, but this world is so big, like, wow. And finding a way to, without diminishing myself, but go back to a place where I can remember some of the language I used and was very familiar with, to guide them through this internal alchemy of, starting with awareness, then moving to what do you want? Where do you want to go? What makes you unique? What are you curious about? And then you infuse more of a empowerment structure. One of my archetypes is architect. And the way I've tried to integrate that is what structure, what reference, what set of information, what passion, what energy. I'm really big into energy work. I do a lot of that actually too, stabilizing people's energy. And then building a structure for that person. But that doesn't happen. That it can't be just a me thing. That person has to be aware in order, and there's this like volley of communication going on so that structure can be built, can be implemented. And then at that point, once all that, the awareness is there, the North Star is there, the vision is there, and the structure is formulating, then it's more about accountability, encouragement, empowerment, and holding space. So that's kind of the process. But the alchemical process is a very internal, it's a one-on-one thing. Like everyone's doing that internally. And it's happening all the time, all around us, whether you're aware of it or not. It's just how much do you want to be aware of?
Yeah, I also think a big part of that is the releases that the body has through crying, through screaming, through laughter, through, there's quite a lot of cleansing that happens. I love your process, Austin. Yeah, curiosity in, I do a lot of ancestral work as well. How have you linked up what you were going through your lineage?
A little bit. There was a time after a summit that I participated in, or not, but I was listening to, there was an opportunity to speak with an oracle, and she dated my timeline down to Celtic times. And one of the things that came up for her was left foot. So I looked into that. What was its metaphysical significance and everything, and it had everything to do with receiving. So for me, there was also a vow of poverty that was in my ancestry, and so that's actually when I got into tarot, because she was doing oracle, and so I was like, oh, this is very interesting. I wonder how it's different. Why is it different? What's the significance there? And that opened up this whole new door to me start becoming aware. There's that aware again of, why is this coming up? Why is it being presented to me right now? If it's around me, it's within me. So I started to look into it, and it was very ancestral, and I'm probably still working through some of those things, but that's fascinating that you do that work. Maybe we should catch up after this.
Absolutely, yeah, I'd love that. Yeah, there's so much there that is there, because we really are the memory, or aspects of the memory, of the people that have walked before us, and yeah, it's absolutely beautiful to see that. And yeah, that aspect of going within, that aspect of explaining, that aspect of kind of like changing the programs moving forward becomes really, really important. And I also believe that when we heal for ourselves, we heal for the 7 generations before and the 7 generations to come, because we change behaviors, we change attitudes, we change all the rest of that. And while we're doing that, for that little bit, we heal the collective. That one little bit, each little light ends up healing that, which is quite beautiful. So I love that you've gone into that aspect of, this is showing up for me. Why? And I feel that also with the healing aspect of it, because I also believe that when we are ready, that trauma shows up, and it's almost kind of like all that experience shows up that we're ready to go through, because when we forget, everything's in divine timing as well. So it almost kind of like brings that up when we're ready to deal with that. But it's yeah, I find it so beautiful that you're like, okay, what's next? Let's do it. Let's get on with this. Let's move through that. And it never ends. Absolutely, it doesn't. We start to get to know who we are, and I think that's a lot of the times that on a grander spectrum of things, I think that is what our purpose is on this planet, is to get to know who we are.
Yeah,
right?
know thyself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yeah, if a great biblical like Christian thing. Oh, I'm losing it. What was it? Oh, it was something along the lines of God never puts anything in front of you that you're not able to handle. If I took that in an esoteric route, the way I see it is very similar to what you just said about there's a reason it's showing up now, and it's that's like your opportunity. That's the gold.
Yeah.
But also, if you don't leap for that opportunity, it'll wait. It'll come back. That's that feminine energy. It doesn't. Feminine energy does not have a loud bark. It is raw power. It's a silent power, and it will be patient for you. But we are limitless, eternal, divine, infinite beings.
Yeah, I agree. The opportunities will keep showing up. So usually we say, don't resist it, choose it, do the work. Don't resist it. It's going to keep showing up one way or another. And one part of your life will actually, it usually tends to show up in all parts of one's life when we're going through a certain theme or a certain conditioning that we're working through as well. It tends to show up. So yeah, you're right. So don't resist it, choose it is my motto.
And there's powerful ways of outlets, screaming into a pillow, whatever it be, releasing. Somatic breath work is very of a visceral experience where it gives an opportunity to move some of that energy. Marma method, Ayurveda, there's so many of them.
So much.
But the reason I bring that up is because if you so choose your free will choice to maybe not dive in curiously of why is this before me? Why has God, universe, source, energy presented this to me? We're not like animals that are not we're self-conscious beings, self-sovereign beings. So it'll be stored somewhere in your field, even if it's not in your energetic physical body, it's then in your light body, your aura body. And it messes up your harmonic resonance. And that's why hurt people. You know, they are most likely in a mode of fear or victimhood.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So now, how can we summarize many of these insights and many of these experiences that you have had, and make up something so that younger people such as yourself and people that are being challenged with these new ways of perceiving the world can cope with that instead of following the traditional limiting route?
Wow. I thought you were going to say, let's summarize the talk. You know, that is part of what, but to answer it, that is part of my mission, I believe, is, you know, as I work towards elevating my own being, my own, this version of myself, part of my mission is to fine tune a structure, a system that can do just that. Because I want to empower and elevate and transcend these labels where they're just not necessary. You know, this absolution of these terms is not necessary. And when I say necessary, I mean not diminishing. If a label is used, if the word is used, it should be to empower. That's how I see it. But maybe a starting point for anybody, get curious, you know, really get curious. Don't settle for absolutes. This has this meaning, and that's the only meaning it can have. Because I don't know if you're familiar with Bashar, but you know, you can take it in a similar way of follow your excitement for as long as you can with no insistence on the outcome in terms of a definition. Take it in, but expand it, being curious as far as you can, for as long as you can, with no insistence on any one meaning, and just find out where that takes you. Be curious about who you are, and you know, let the universe guide you. If it's there in front of you, it's there to show you something, and you might not. Don't be insistent on figuring out what that something is. Sometimes it comes down the road. It's just asking you to hold space for it and be open-minded to, yeah, I'm here. I see you. That's often what, you know, people like me wanted in the first place, was we just wanted to be seen, heard, soothed, nurtured, that, you know, what we're experiencing, although it may be different from what you're experiencing, we're just as worthy, we're just as sovereign to be here. So I want that's one of my missions, is to bring this out in a structured format that people can follow suit in a way that works for them. One thing I am stickler about is, if that system works for you, great. I'm so glad that you found that. It didn't work for me. I had to formulate my own system. And so to create a system that creates systems is the ultimate mission, to answer your question, David.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Austin, for sharing all these experiences, and thank you for opening up a gateway for many people that need that expanding view instead of the limiting medical side sometimes. Yes. So now we are in a new dimension. We are entering into this new dimension that give us this power to understand, to allow ourselves to be more aware and curious, as you say, and less instantaneous and desperate on the quick solution, on the quick fix. No.
Yes. May I say one final thing?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Indigo souls out there, use your power for good. If you, Florence Chevelle Shen says it greatly, you know, if you steal, you'll be stealed from. If you curse, you will be cursed. If you judge, you will be judged. Use your power for good, because I promise you it is a mirror and it will come back.
Thanks.
That's a great message. I love Bashara as well. Yeah, what a wonderful message. Austin, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah.
Well, you can walk the journey with me on my YouTube channel. I do this little series called Awareness Documentation, because I found it was a unique way to not teach, but more show people, you know, I'm just as human as you. I'm going through this stuff. Listen to me talk to myself and walk through some of this stuff. So there's that. It's Austin C. Jacob at YouTube. And then primarily right now, I'm just working on the Facebook platform. I have a couple offers out there. I really am into doing this energy work. I've seen a lot of great things from that. And it works on like animals too. It's amazing. And yeah, I've got a lot of things in store, but you know, I've got a lot coming up, but the best way to get in touch with me is either my YouTube or the Facebook right now.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
We will add those handles and all of those things so that people can contact you in the description. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. And of course, we encourage the younger generation to get in touch with Austin and with us to ask questions and to share your journey, of course, if you want. Thank you, and we'll listen in our next episode. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.